Talk about the geography of love. So, where do you find love? It's an interesting question that I've been thinking about. Allow me to compare. Okay, so I live obviously in the West, American city. One thing you notice, right? You walk around, you look for walkable spaces, right? And you get to these walkable spaces, and what you end up realizing is you see that the environment is sterile. It's very unromantic, not very sexy, right? And the concern becomes I stumbled upon some data. I'll go ahead and show it now. And it shows, it was a graphic, and it showed that most people found their romantic partners in the US. One of the biggest ways that they found their partners in the US was through friends. So the issue becomes, well, how do you find love? Well, first you need to address the bigger problem, which is that if people used to meet their partners or romantic partners through friends, well, the issue is people don't have friends anymore. So therefore they can't meet romantic partners. So maybe the issue is to address that problem, right? Which is that people don't have the time to either cultivate, their old friendships, or also to make new ones. So that's another issue entirely, right? But addressing that issue would address the sort of love gap that there is right now, or the lack thereof. So that's one thing. The other thing is using your friends to find romantic partners it has many benefits, right? And let me explain. One of them is that I'm allowed to use my friends as a filter, right? So if I, for example, I'm a classy guy, I prefer an educated woman. Naturally, that filter is, right, the likelihood is that your friends are going to be similar to you, and i.e. their friends are going to be similar to them. So the idea is, if I use friends as a filter, right, to weed out undesirables, and in turn filter through the type of women that I'm interested in, for example, then that's a great way, right? Because what happens is, let's say I meet a friend through a friend, naturally their guard's going to be down because they say, well, there's social consequences to this not working out, for example. Okay. So that becomes an issue. But let's just say, hypothetically speaking, you don't have that option, right? You've maximized all your friendships and you can't seem to find a romantic partner. Well, there is an alternative in terms of geography where you can go to find this. One place I recommend is Latin America. Okay, and let me tell you why. Latin America, the plaza, the public square, is a place for people to be seen and to see. And one of the beauties of these places is that they're very romantic, they're beautiful, they're great places to stroll, to sit around, to mingle, to catch up with old friends, to run into people. It has that element of surprise, which is great. And it's also very family oriented. And the thing that's interesting, if you go to anywhere in Latin America, is that usually people have their friend groups are very much intact, and they tend to be large, and they tend to be tapped into often. You see a lot of friend groups there in Latin America. Another example that I remember, I was very envious of the lifestyle. I went to Bari, which is like southeastern Italy, and just the level of romance and beauty and love that was in the air was like intoxicating. I was like, wow, it's like nothing I had ever seen before in any American city. I haven't been to Miami. Maybe there it's better, although I have my reservations. But anyhow, so you go to these places and then you realize like it really is determined by the landscape, right? The design. And the problem is that American cities are designed for sterility. They're designed through a corporate lens. It's not for the sake of human capital or for habitus or for you and I to meet someone. And I think that becomes the biggest issue, is that the geography of love is really tied to the way that the landscapes are designed. And so the only really way to get around that in American cities in particular is, like I said, through friend groups. That would be the only way to sort of get around the fact that the landscape isn't lending itself to love. There is no geography of love per se. I went to Hollywood a couple weeks ago with my buddy, and I was like, well, I was a little bit reserved. I wasn't so keen on the idea just because Hollywood, kind of ratchet, kind of not a place that I want to hang out in, especially, excuse me, given my age. I just felt like it wasn't the place for me. One second. Anyhow, there was a knock at the door. So anyway, so we're in Hollywood, and one of the first things I noticed was just like the lack of just beauty that there was. It was really a deficit in beauty. And I'm not just talking about the women, the men as well. And it was very disappointing because I'm like, this is supposed to be like the young, the sexy, the single. And I thought I was going to be dazzled. And really, it was just it's very disappointing, frankly, just the lack of beauty, right? And I'm quote unquote in one of the cities where apparently there's a lot of beauty. And it was just very disappointing. But the other thing that I realized, like, I was like, man, how hard is it for a single guy now to try to find a romantic partner in this place? It just doesn't lend itself for that. It's very difficult. And all you have to do is walk around and you see how difficult it is. There's just something in the air here that's different in Latin America that I feel like if anybody that hasn't gone, you should go so you could see the difference and understand what I mean by how certain spaces lend themselves to more romance. For example, in Latin America, they got this thing that's called piropos, which is just like the gift of gab, using your words to, elicit the opposite sex and bring attention and show interest, right? But you do it in a very curvaceous way. It's not so direct. And that's the other thing too, right? It's the language, it's the landscape, it's the culture, it's the music, it's the weather, it's the flora and the fauna. It's all the things that make these places different, which I think there's some places in America that do have the opportunity to emulate sort of like a Latin American aesthetic. The difference is you would have to just design the cities differently. That doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. But I will say this, there is hope. You just got to go to Latin America if you feel dissatisfied with your love life in America. That there is a possibility that you can go somewhere else that has more romantic places that you might be able to find a partner in. But ultimately, try your best to fix at least your social connections, right? Your friend groups first. Prioritize that, put that in order. And then if that doesn't work and you can't find someone through that means, then perhaps, get your passport and decide to travel elsewhere and see if you can find that somewhere else. All right, I'll see you in the next one.